This is my favorite white sandwich bread recipe. It's incredibly soft, rich, and perfect for sandwiches. And once you start making bread like this at home, it's really hard to go back to store-bought. There's also one small ingredient secret that I add to this dough that makes the bread noticeably better. I'll show you what that is in just a minute. But first, let's get the dough started. The first step is weighing out our water and milk and bringing it up to about 110 degrees. I like to do this in a small pot over high heat. It only takes a minute or two, so don't walk away. Once it comes up to temperature, we can add our butter to the pot so it melts into the liquid. As you can see, I'm using a scale here. If you don't have one, you can absolutely measure with cups. But if you do have a scale, you'll get much more consistent results using it. Next, I'll weigh out my yeast and sugar and add those directly to the mixing bowl. I'll also go ahead and weigh out my flour separately so that's ready to go. And I'll add the salt to the flour and set that aside. At this point, I'll check the temperature of my liquid ingredients. They were a little warm initially, so once they come down to about 110 degrees, I'll add them to the bowl with the yeast and sugar. Then we'll let that sit for about 5 minutes to give the yeast a chance to bloom into the liquid. Once the warm liquid goes into the bowl with the yeast and sugar, I'll add my secret ingredient. I like to add about a tablespoon of sourdough starter. It doesn't make this a sourdough bread, but it adds a nice depth of flavor to the dough and gives it a little extra leavening power. Once that's combined, we can start adding our flour. Add it in gradually and then let the mixer knead the dough for about 10 minutes. So even though I weighed all my ingredients using a scale, this dough still doesn't look quite right to me. So what I did is I ended up adding some flour here and then I kneaded it for a little bit longer. The dough should be pulling away from the sides of the bowl and this one wasn't. So it just tells me that it needs more flour because it's a little too wet. And this is a great example of why I don't like cooking from recipes. Recipes are really great to kind of show you how to get things done, but typically you need to add more of something to make it right because every kitchen, every environment, every place is different when you start cooking ingredients. Now that the dough is kneaded for about 10 minutes, we can remove the dough hook. I just leave the dough right in the same bowl, cover it with plastic wrap, and let it rise until it doubles in size. And this is one of the reasons right here why I love this recipe so much. The dough rises really quickly. Most of the time it doubles in less than an hour. And while we're getting this dough ready, I'll go ahead and butter my loaf pan so it's ready for shaping. Now that our pan is buttered, we can go ahead and get our dough into the pan. First, we need to punch down the dough in the bowl. And you want to make sure you get as much air out of this as you can. I'll just roll it into a log right here in the bowl and place it right into the loaf pan. Once it's in the pan, I'll press it down so it fills the corners and spreads out evenly. You can be pretty aggressive here. This dough still needs to rise again, so it's not a problem if you knock some of the air out. Once the dough is evenly filling the pan, we'll cover it with plastic wrap and let it proof again. And in this second rise, just like the first one, it usually takes less than an hour. This is an extremely quick loaf to make. We'll go ahead and transfer this into our preheated oven and bake it until it's done. Just a few minutes into the bake, I noticed the top was starting to brown pretty quickly on one side, so I rotated the loaf to help it color evenly. Then I tented it loosely with a piece of aluminum foil to keep the top from getting any darker. One nice thing about working with the convection oven is that there's a fan inside that moves the hot air around, which helps the oven cook more evenly. But that circulating air can also brown surfaces pretty quickly, so it's easy to over brown something if you're not paying attention. This is what we're looking for right here, a nice golden brown top. Once the bread is finished baking, we'll transfer it to a wire rack to cool. Greasing the pan really helps here because the loaf should come right out. I'll just flip the pan over, let the bread slide out onto its side, and then set it right side up on the rack. Once the bread is cooled for a bit, we can go ahead and start slicing into it. And the best way I know to test fresh bread is with a little butter while it's still warm. This bread is perfect for sandwiches. And you'll actually see me use it in some of the sandwiches I make in my new sandwich series that I'm posting every Wednesday. So if you enjoy cooking like this and want to see more recipes like this one, make sure you subscribe. And we'd love to have you gather at our table